language provides the same function for our mental life as the digestive juices provide for your body, right? We can only absorb through the gut wall fluids, can't we? That's all we can take in. All solids are excreted. So therefore we need a variety of enzymes, acids and other juices to break down and render fluid what is initially when we put it in our mouth solid. And only what is fluid will be absorbed and then distributed and integrated. So in the same way, only what is given a linguistic representation, that is not necessarily spoken, but a linguistic representation, that I can link this experience to words, and through words to knowledge and understanding, past, future, etc., etc. If I can't, if it remains as an autonomous image, it will never change. How will an image ever change? It will just remain that image. And every time it comes back, it will carry with it the same affect, the same action components, and it will reactivate itself and won't go anywhere, and I'll just have an intrusive re-experience. The mere fact of describing it will disrupt it. Right? The mere fact of describing it will disrupt it and if I give a verbal representation of it, thinking will begin. That's all we have to do. We don't need to add meaning, we just need to convert sensory representation into verbal representation or linguistic representation. Let me give you it's a neat example. We'll get back to the social system in a minute. I did early in my career debriefing with a group of middle-aged disability workers who had been terrorised by a 22-year-old mildly disabled young man with a knife in their community residential unit for us, 3/4 of an hour, and they had to lock themselves in the office and ring for help and so on and so on. They were very upset. About an hour or so into the debriefing, they were continuously referring to the knife and the weapon. After an hour or so, I realised I didn't have any kind of picture of the knife. What kind of knife were you imagining? What do you imagine?
Flatline. Butter knife.
Bread and butter. They didn't give them light sharp knives.
Yeah, that's knowledge.
Knowledge.
What do you
Because I went bigger shot.
Yeah.
And then I went, no, that's silly. It would
Yeah,
be
see, that's the DHS workers. I should have asked you.
Sorry, we are from disabilities, so.
Yeah. So can you see how your fantasy is actually producing an image which you have no right to? Because in my verbal representation, I only represented that there was a knife, not what the knife was. Now, you've now been sucked into my level of trauma, and you, as a nice, caring clinician, say, oh, that must be really terrible. How come DHS allows that to happen? That's outrageous. You should take out a work cover claim on it. Can you see how you get seduced? So I think the most important things for me is that we must listen to what is being said and ask ourselves what is in language and what isn't in language. And the image is not in language because I can't see it. The only way I can get to see it is if they describe it to me. Right?
I've got a different example of that. I did a debriefing once with somebody after the kangaroo flat shootings.
Yeah.
It was a teenage girl who was at home with her younger brother, and they'd been effectively trapped in the house after the neighbour shot a few other people, including some police. And we'd been talking for about an hour, and I suddenly realised that they hadn't actually been alone. She kept talking about her mother being absent from the house, but it turned out her father had actually been at home all the time, but he was elderly. He'd gone to sleep. So as far as she was concerned, he wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
but he hadn't actually, I just assumed because she took talking about being alone, that he
Yeah.
hadn't been in the other people there.
And so until that sleeping father is linguistically inserted, you can't actually process what that means. Yeah. So after an hour, I realised I can't see the knife. And I simply said, what kind of knife is it? It's a bread and butter knife. Now, if I'd wanted to really push it, I could have said, how long is it? How sharp is the, you see I'm using words, how sharp is the blade? Not very. What's the tip of it like? Round. So that linguistic analysis brings into the linguistic system of meanings particular features of the knife that relate to its capacity to cause injury. And that immediately reduces the threat. Now, as long as they're talking about knife and weapon, they're talking about death, aren't they? That's what knives and weapons do. That's why you think that way. But all I had to say was, can you describe the knife? And they described the knife and then looked at each other and said, isn't it lucky he didn't have the carving knife? And I suppose, you know, he couldn't have really killed us with that. It wouldn't have taken a while, wouldn't it? A bit of release of tension. But he could have done us a bit of an injury. Yes, that's the trauma, right? The trauma is not that we were nearly killed by this machete-wielding madman, but no, we could have actually had some very unpleasant lacerations from this very angry young man with a piece of metal, right? And so the mere fact that they describe it in words stimulates their own thought processes, because the words lead to words which permit thought and reasoning and evaluation and threat levels and so on. And I think it's terribly important that we be aware of that, and that we, the first thing we must do is get the experience represented linguistically, and then we can start to work with it. So we've got to make sure we don't get sucked in and put our fantasy in the black hole.
I guess that's called a reality test.
Yeah. Yeah. Because reality isn't given to us by emotionally charged images. It's given us to us as a product of logical, rational thinking using language. Language is the underpinnings of thought.